Supersensory wisdom and perception. Our eardrums are able to detect sounds all around us, but their range of detection is limited to certain frequencies. This range is known as the human audible range. Now let us consider a person who is floating mid-air on a parachute that is slowly descending towards the ground. This man can be considered to have access to sounds in all directions, above, below, left and right, all within a defined distance and certain frequencies. This range defines the limits of both distance and frequency of the audible range of this person. So this range defines the limit of the strongest sense of the 5 physical senses of this person, which is his hearing. As the person's hearing is the strongest physical sense a person has that brings information to the brain of that person from the outside world. So in this way, the person's ability to communicate with others and with the outside world is related to the person's sense of hearing. Our sense of sight is also limited, as it operates within a certain range of frequencies. So what we can see is limited to visible frequencies that fall within the range of infrared and ultraviolet frequencies. So any visible frequencies within this range can be sensed by our brains. So all information within these visible frequencies can be sensed by our eyes and communicated to our brains. However, the horizon of this range is limited, as we are not able to see above or below us, or outside the visible horizon as defined by our peripheral vision. But our sense of hearing is not limited by such a horizon, as we can hear in all immediate directions that fall within our audible frequency. In regard to our sense of sight, we are also able to see from very tiny things to large objects, and those which are close to us or far distance objects that fall within our peripheral range. That is, as long as the object is not behind or above or below us. Our other 3 physical senses are complementary to these senses, but it is primarily our sense of sight and hearing that connects our brains to the outside world. The information gathered by our physical senses are all processed within a certain section of our brain. These information define the world of our sensory perception. So the limits of this world are defined by the range of our hearing on one level and by our sense of sight on another level. Because all these informations are processed in a single point or region in our brain, this point or region becomes our natural point of orientation. As we start to see this point as the center of our world and the center of our existence, thus we all tend to associate our center of sensory perception as the center of our own existence. However, as a result of this, all the regions it can't sense or doesn't have information about, it tends to ignore in its calculation in regards to its own existence, as it considers them irrelevant or non-existent. However, as the result of this, all the regions it can't sense or doesn't have information about, it tends to ignore in its calculation in regards to its own existence, as it considers them irrelevant or non-existent. So only things it can sense it recognizes as relevant and existent. All the facts that we have discussed thus far relate to our physical senses. Because of all this, everyone thinks themselves as being at the center of existence and doesn't realize that his awareness is very limited and his world is very small, and moreover it bears no relation to the wider existence. So what this person considers as I or sense of self is in effect what this person is defining through his or her sense of perception. So in some sense, it is like having a computer which has many senses that gathers information from all around the world or the cosmos, and then collects all the information and displays it on its screen. This computer, and how we connect to it or use it, is performing a similar function to our brain, as it is similar to how our consciousness or soul uses our brain to gather information from the outside world. But if what gives me consciousness or awareness, which I call I, becomes disconnected from the computer, which is our brain, it will not lose its sense of self, as its sense of self is independent from the computer or the senses that feed the computer information about the outside world. For example, if a person looks into a mirror, the image of his face is reflected in the mirror, and this image is processed by his brain, and he associates this image with himself. But if the person puts the mirror away or wears a blindfold, he no longer sees the image. But that does not mean he has lost his sense of self. So he doesn't say, "Where am I?" or "Where did I go?" because he is still connected to what gives him awareness or consciousness. As this connection with his sense of awareness or consciousness is not based on a physical perception, but on a supersensory perception level. Now the question arises, how is this supersensory perception everyone has in regards to one's awareness can come to control the physical senses of our body, in the sense that the person no longer only relies on the central perception within his brain as a means of gaining information about the external world or the cosmos, but uses other means to gather and provide this information to his sense of self or I. This is what is meant by supersensory perception. So the question arises, how can a person achieve this? Well, this is the subject of our other teachings that will be discussed in a stepwise manner in the future.